We often talk to youth workers about, and parents about, the threefold influence that we should have on our kids. Prophetic, preventive, and redemptive. If we're being prophetic, we're speaking God's word to the realities that exist. We recognize these issues. If we're being preventive, we're taking steps to build guardrails, borders, and boundaries out around our kids to keep them from going down roads that they shouldn't go down. But if we're not talking about these things at all, and something visits a family, something comes into a student's life that undoes them, some sin, some brokenness that just changes the course of their life. Now, where are we? We're in the redemptive mode, and we need to be there and have those redemptive responses. But I think if we're aware ahead of time and we're exercising the prophetic and the preventive influence, we'll have far less opportunity, let's say, to exercise the redemptive influence.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the show today. Thanks for jumping in and making this podcast today a part of your day wherever you are. Thank you so much for listening. If you're new, welcome to the show. Glad to have you jumping in here today with a really helpful, important topic and a good friend of the show. So I know you're going to get a lot from that. If you are not already subscribed and following the show, make sure you do that. Jump over to thelongerhaul.com, get on the mailing list as well. And of course, you can jump over and join the Facebook group there on the Facebook. Jumping in today with a good friend of the show, Walt Mueller from the Center for Parent and Youth Understanding, really jumping in and tackling, primarily trying to address how do we as youth pastors, youth ministers help parents be equipped and have a better understanding of youth culture, and especially the ones that they're living through. We touch on that. We touch on even how as youth pastors and youth ministers, how we can stay current. We talk about youth ministry in different ages. So if you're just starting out in your early 20s, or if you're even on the older end of the spectrum, what that looks like, the benefits to both, maybe some warnings on both sides as well. So just really, really, really helpful in terms of how to navigate this idea of culture that is changing so quickly. So lots to get from this, lots to take away from this episode today. Links and resources mentioned, and there are a few you can grab at thelongerhaul.com/episode 146. That's longerhaul.com/episode 146. So grab a notepad, grab a cup of coffee or something, and sit back and listen. Great interview today with Walt Mueller, who drops tons of wisdom as always. So here is today's interview with Walt Mueller.
Welcome to the Longer Haul Youth Ministry Podcast, helping you survive and thrive in youth ministry. And now, here's your host, Jody Livingston.
Well, hey, Walt, welcome back to the show. Pumped to have you on today. Excited even as we jump into a topic that I know is a passion of yours.
Yeah,
for sure. We talk about youth culture. For folks who might be new to the show or not familiar with you, maybe take just a minute, introduce yourself.
Sure.
Explain a little bit of what you do.
And thanks so much for having me on. I love doing these things, and it always, at my age, it always amazes me that we have this. I don't ever want to grow tired of the technology and just the miracle of this, and what a wonderful thing it is to be able to communicate. So thanks for having me on. So my name's Walt Mueller, and we are, believe it or not, in our 35th year here at the Center for Parent Youth Understanding. We really want to partner with parents, with youth workers, with pastors, with counselors, educators, to help them understand what's going on in today's youth culture, and then help them navigate that with their students, help them pass that information on to parents, and respond in ways that bring honor and glory to God and are faithful to the scriptures and God's order and design for our lives. And so there's lots of those things out there. We've been doing this for 35 years. And man, a lot has changed. We mentioned Conclave before we started to record. We're going to be exhibiting down there and have a booth. And so we're pulling some things together here. And one of the things we pulled together is this old TV we have that we're going to hopefully be able to bring along and kind of quote unquote broadcast some old youth culture stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the things we pulled up on YouTube to put through this thing is the first 2 hours of MTV being on the air back in 1981. And it was just fascinating to watch that again, and just ponder how much the world has changed, not just technologically, but the pressures, the problems, the choices, the expectations our kids face. And even beyond that, just the way the music industry has changed thematically, far more concentrated stuff that I think is affecting our kids at younger and younger ages. So, that's what we're about. And we have lots and lots of resources online at cpyu.org. Hopefully we'll get to talk about some of those, but that's our mission here. We really believe, all of us who care for kids and want to see kids come to faith and grow in their faith, we are cross-cultural missionaries, because their world is markedly different from the world that we grew up in, whether you're my age or, old as a grandfather, or someone who's just 2 or 3 years out of high school or working with students. It is a different world. We hear that all the time. Yeah,
and it feels like things are changing faster than they've ever changed. And so I feel like I get my head around one thing and then something else is coming.
Yeah. Let me, because I was just working on something here that I put up online on teens and online gambling. Mm-hmm. So we're recording this the day after what was advertised as 5 days of playoff football, right? So we had a Thursday and Friday with college playoffs, NCAA playoffs, and then we had 3 days of NFL playoffs. And I mean, you couldn't count the number of commercials, ads, references to the online gambling platforms. And, I just think this is like we are just spewing cocaine, if I may say it that way, at our kids. This is so addictive. The only behavioral addiction, if I'm calling that right, in the DSM right now is gambling. And there's nothing else, and they know that it's a mental health, a social health, it's a social problem, and we need to be on the front lines of this as parents and youth workers to address that. I think 60 to 80% of our high school kids say that they gambled for money over the course of the last year. And I keep thinking about this. If my teenage self had a smartphone and access to these things, who would I become? I put it on the same level as pornography.
That's
in terms
what I was
of
going to say.
Yeah,
it feels like gambling is the new porn.
Yeah, and it's we never know till 5, 6, 10, 15, 20 years down the road who are these kids going to be when they're adults, when they're dads, when they're moms, when they're employees, when they're in youth ministry. If we get sucked into these things. And so these are the kinds of things we're trying to say, hey, look, we're going to raise a warning here, and we're going to do it realistically. We're not going to overstate it. We're not going to understate it, but we want to help you understand it and give you some tools to begin to respond to it. So that's just an example. And by the way, all that was the reason I brought that up was just what you said about how it's changing so fast. That legalized online gambling, that wasn't until 2018. So we're just talking, less than 7 years ago, and think about the changes that have taken place as a result of that.
Gosh. Well, how do you, what are you doing to stay, how do you yourself stay up on youth culture?
That's a great question, because that's changed over the years. Early on, people would say, youth workers would say to me, give me some tools. What do I need to do to stay up to date? And I'd say to them, okay, first thing is survey your kids. What are they reading? What are they listening to? What are they watching? Go ahead and read it, listen to it, and watch it. And not to be entertained, but to understand your mission field, how to bring the gospel to bear on those things. That's changed quite a bit, because the reading, the listening, and the watching is all over the place, thanks to these devices, and just anybody can put anything up on the internet. So you do want to ask, and you do want to check these things out. I would also say to people back then, watch a little MTV. I'd give a list of 4 or 5 magazines if you can subscribe to these. And there were a lot of guys and gals who they would take that advice and they'd get the church to pay for, Rolling Stone, Spin, Entertainment Weekly, some of the other magazines, things like that, teen girl magazines. We don't have as many of those anymore. It's all online now, and for the most part. So now you really have to be, a little more step back and kind of look at the big picture. And so we try to track with the news. We post a lot of that on our site every day at cpyu.org. So, we can curate that, distill that a little bit for people, see, pass on what we think is big. But to be honest, it's hard. It's gotten harder to keep up because there's so much more and it's changing so much faster. But those are some of the things we do, and we work to keep our ear to the ground. So we talk to youth workers a lot. We talk to school teachers a lot. We listen to students themselves.
When you're, I mean, we're talking about the challenge of a youth pastor, youth minister trying to keep up. That feels hard enough, and we're hanging out with kids pretty regularly.
Yeah.
So some of that we see like firsthand, right? I'm watching that. I mean, even this morning, talking about some conversations we've had in the last couple weeks with some of our students and young adults. As a parent, I feel often, and my kids are on the older end of the teen years, right? So my youngest is 16 and my oldest is about to be 22. So we're kind of graduating out of that. Then 2 there in the middle of that. As a parent, though, you often feel out of depth just in normal parenting things. Forget culture, just trying to navigate all the challenges of that. But then there's this added pressure of trying to understand what's happening in my kid. And even like you said earlier, it's so different than the world that we grew up in a million different ways. How do I, as a youth pastor, youth minister, help my parents understand culture? And where's the line on that? Like if does that make sense?
Well, yes, it does. Absolutely. And, look, I get this question a lot. And your question now is really not about teaching parents how to parent. And I think youth workers need to understand that, because if you're not a parent, that's a difficult thing to do. And I think all of us who are now parents, who were in youth ministry before we were parents, we realize how much we thought we knew and how much we didn't know, right? And
listen,
so
I was an expert at parenting.
Yeah, you and me both. We could have written a book together, right? And we knew what all these parents were doing wrong. Now we have kids, and by the way, my kids. I have grandkids now. My 4 are all adults, and the parenting thing never stops. I mean, you're involved in their lives, and they have struggles, they have bumps, they have bruises. We live in a sinful and a broken world, so you have that. But what you're talking about is really serving sort of as a translator or another set of eyes, another set of ears. And so anything you discover, you communicate. Now, one of the things I would say to every youth pastor, youth worker out there is communicate to parents early on and keep communicating regularly that I am here to support you. And I am going to, with your permission, I hope you'll give me your permission, I'm going to pass on to you anything that I think is significant enough for you to be aware of in the culture. And I also want to keep the lines of communication open where if there's something significant about your son or about your daughter, about this student that I'm working with, would you be willing to give me the freedom to come to you? And can I give you the freedom to come to me if there's something I need to know? Because I'm here to support you. I'm not here to supplant you. I'm not here to take your place. Yeah. And so you set the table that way, and you generate these expectations then where you have the freedom, to email, to text, and not just one parent at a time. I mean, that's valuable, but your whole crew of parents. And I would also say get parents together every few months to just make them aware of something. If you see a good resource, pass it on. One of the things we've tried to do here at CPYU is make that easy. And so we started this new resource about a year and a half ago we call parent prompts. We're getting to the point where we're going to be putting them out maybe once a week. And we take a topic, and a youth worker can pass this on. And so I just mentioned the teen gambling thing. We have one of those, all right, on teens and online gambling. And so we break it down where it's not overwhelming in terms of length, but I give them, 4 bullet points on here's what's happening, right? Here's the world. Here's what's happening in the world. Then we move to here's what God's word says, and we'll give them 4 or 5, points that they can talk to or understand what the scriptures say about this particular issue. And then we move to here's how to respond. Here's how to have conversations with your kids, some of the talking points on this. And I think what's really crucial is a lot of youth workers, if you're timid, you might wait till there's a problem. My encouragement is watch what's happening in the culture. Try to stay on the front end of the wave. When you see something, when you hear something, make them aware of it right away so that they aren't caught off guard down the road. We often talk to youth workers about and parents about the threefold influence that we should have on our kids. Prophetic, preventive, and redemptive. If we're being prophetic, we're speaking God's word to the realities that exist. We recognize these issues. If we're being preventive, we're taking steps to build guardrails, borders, and boundaries around our kids to keep them from going down roads that they shouldn't go down. But if we're not talking about these things at all, and something visits a family, something comes into a student's life that undoes them, some sin, some brokenness, that just changes the course of their life. Now, where are we? We're in the redemptive mode, and we need to be there and have those redemptive responses. But I think if we're aware ahead of time and we're exercising the prophetic and the preventive influence, we'll have far less opportunity, let's say, to exercise the redemptive influence. And so, again, don't be timid. Youth workers, don't be timid. And just because you're young, that's not an issue. I know as I've gotten older, it generates more respect when I stand in front of parents because I've been there. My hair is gray. You know how that is. And I just, I didn't have that back then, but I could communicate. I could give them information, and they appreciated that. And so I would encourage youth workers to do that.
Yeah, I think when I was starting out, I was really young, and my view of parents in my ministry was very different. They were almost in the way,
Yeah. Yep. And this is an echo of me.
I think during that time, we were saying that, like in youth ministry conferences, joking about it,
Yeah.
And so in my mind, the only reason I really needed parents was to help drive the rental car because I wasn't old enough to. Then I'm trying to tell them all the things that they're doing wrong. Then I became a parent and realized, man, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I've talked a lot about the stages. When I look back, I think becoming a parent was a moment that changed my ministry in every way, both personally and how it was viewed. And then when I hit 30, for some reason, 30-year-old, I remember by 30, I'd been married, already had 4 kids. But I hit 30 and it was like I was an adult in the minds of these parents all of a sudden. I wasn't just a 20-something. And I began to see that perspective change. Then I became a parent with teenagers. And that was a massive game changer, both in how I was able to be seen from parents, to your point, as an authority, and how I viewed parents. Now it's weird because I'm older than them, a lot of them, and that freaks me out still. But in every stage of that parenting, or a youth pastor, like when I was young, I thought I understood culture because I was them.
Yeah.
But I didn't really understand how it was going to impact them long term. Now on this side, I'm like, well, and the viewpoint is sometimes, well, he's kind of old and out of touch, maybe, in a lot of things on purpose. But at the same time, you're right. I have an opportunity now to step into parents and being more authoritative, and I'm more intentional now about being in touch and understanding what students are facing, and what parents are dealing with too. But almost every conversation with a parent and family comes back to understanding culture, or a misunderstanding of culture that their parents are not grasping.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said something there that's really important. If I can rewind for a minute and, just thinking about, how, I think of it this way, and I'll be talking about this at Conclave, instilling wisdom and discernment in our students. We need wisdom and discernment instilled in us. I've been reading through Proverbs, and the first 9 chapters, it just, every time I read that, it just hits me over the head. And I realize, I don't know nearly as much now as I thought I knew, whether it's a year ago, 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. All that to say, with the changes that are taking place, and especially if you're a younger youth worker, and this is a sign that I'm old that I say this, right? And I hope it comes with wisdom and discernment. I hope. Don't jump into co-opting cultural trends and cultural forms and all the technologies without thought and caution, because we don't understand when these things are new, what they're going to do to us. I often quote Marshall McLuhan, who back in the 60s, a communications guru, who a lot of people thought was crazy. He was like a media critic. And he said this, he's the one that's famous for saying the medium is the message, but he also said, first we shape our tools and then our tools shape us. What did he mean by that? We've got a perfect example right now with smartphones, because, the iPhone comes on the scene, 2007? And kids are just wanting these things. Parents are putting them in the hands of their kids at younger and younger ages. And because everyone else has it, and because I don't want my kids to think, I'm not their friend. And
Right.
I think the wisest parents are the ones that are being very cautious, because if you look at what is being written now, and I think of Jonathan Haidt and his book, The Anxious Generation, which is one I highly recommend for every
Great
youth
book.
pastor, every youth worker, every parent to read. We're now at the point where we're saying we gave them too much too soon. And look at the mental health crisis we have. Look at the addiction issues we have with smartphones. First, we shape our tools, and then our tools shape us. I think a better way to say that is first we shape or create our tools, and then our tools misshape and recreate us. And it's not necessarily in good ways. And this is, our use of these things, we need to be wise and discerning. And it actually is an act of worship. When we move cautiously in our youth ministries and in our homes, we're endeavoring to bring honor and glory to God and to worship God through the way that we utilize tools. The tools themselves are not bad. I mean, these are good things, right? But they can be used in ways that undo us rather than advance our flourishing. So that was just a word of caution that you prompted there with your comment.
Yeah. And I feel that so much. Like the older I get, the more I realize, gosh, I have so much I still have to learn. And I look back at some of the things that I said early on. I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope no one took my advice, and thankful I didn't get fired for some of the,
with all these changes in youth ministry, and look, I was deeply embedded for decades in the youth specialties world. They were the leading folks, loved those guys. And when they first began and then when they moved on. And so, we've watched things change. And I will say this, many of us who were entrenched there, either benefiting from or leading and training, we got to a point a few years ago when a few of us were sitting around and we said, we've got a lot of stuff we need to repent of. Just in terms of what we were doing with kids, I sort of half jokingly say that a lot of the stuff I did when I was single, first out of college in youth ministry, I could be in prison now for that. And we're not, we're just talking about silly things we did that put kids in physical danger, thinking all in the name of fun, and there's so many things now we've gotten wise to, right? Man, I sound old now, don't I? This is
you and me both, buddy. You and me both.
Yeah, I'm ready to cut off right now because I need to go take a nap. Oh man. Yeah.
Where's the line? Like, how do we discern the line between wanting to remain culturally relevant and yet biblically faithful? Because I think that's a tension in youth ministry we feel often, maybe more than other areas of ministry.
Yeah. Well, boy, that's a good question. And the first thought that pops into my mind is that I think in youth ministry, most of us tend to err on the side of pursuing relevance and cool. And and it's well-intentioned, right? I mean, I want to relate to these kids. I want to be in their world. I want to care for them. I want them to listen to me. I want them to spend time with me. And, as you mentioned, like becoming 30, there's a point there when you're in youth ministry, you get to your later 20s, you're realizing, man, I'm teetering kind of on, stepping out of their world into another world, the adult world or whatever world the geriatric world. I don't know. We felt that way. But there's something to that let me back up and say, I had a youth worker call me once. He was at a conference at a church where they were teaching youth workers how they did youth ministry. They had several hundred youth workers in a room. He actually texted me and he said, I'm not sure if what I'm hearing here right now in this session is correct. And maybe I need to leave the room and come home. And I said, what are you hearing? He said, well, the leader of this youth ministry just told us, don't recruit any volunteer leaders over the age of 30 and always go after the volunteer leaders under the age of 30 who are cool. And I said, that is just absolute foolishness. You need to get out of there right now. Like, why would someone be saying that? Here's what I've learned. And that is that, when you start to get a little nervous about the relevance issue, realize that relationships trump everything.
Yeah.
that your relationships with young people are valuable to them, and they value authenticity. They don't want some old guy trying to look young. They don't want some old gal trying to act young. And what they want is us to be ourselves. And don't we want to nurture them into being themselves and not having to lean into for the rest of their lives? They get enough pressure of this right online from social media about you got to look a certain way, you got to smell a certain way, your hair's got to be a certain way, you got to be shaped a certain, I mean, all that. And it's just ridiculous. That is not what the Lord values. And I've become over time, I kind of went through this little period of, like, are they going to listen to me anymore? Because, well, for example, when I would go speak to kids early on, I'm the big brother. Yeah. Then all of a sudden I became the uncle. Then I became the dad. Now when I walk into a room and I speak to students, I know it's the elephant in the room is, oh, here's my grandfather. And that makes me uneasy. I struggle with that a little bit. I'm going to tell you something that happened to me about a year and a half ago. I was at a youth youth convention, about 1,800 kids out in Estes Park, Colorado, there at the YMCA in the Rockies. A lot of people have been there. And I was asked to come in. They had 4 main morning sessions. I split the time with somebody else. We each did 2 mornings on identity. And I spoke on identity and social media. He spoke on identity, sexuality, and gender. And my wife, if she was here, she would tell you that I was under a lot of anxiety and stress in the 2 months leading up to that. And a lot of it was not just preparing to say what I wanted to say, but are they going to listen to me because I'm this older guy? And it was pretty ironic because I'm talking about identity. So I had to put this, to the test. And so the first day I got up and I confessed to them about halfway through this talk on social media and identity that even when you get older, you struggle, with identity issues. And I said, just as an aside, I hadn't planned to say, I said, look, I'm going to be 67 years old in 2 weeks. I couldn't even complete the sentence. And this entire room erupted in spontaneous applause and cheering. And it really caught me off guard because I thought, wow, maybe they're just amazed to see somebody this old still standing, right? And and then I went on, and afterwards I went to the leaders and I said, can you help me understand what that was all about? And they said, absolutely. Our kids are looking for older and wiser people who they can listen to, who will tell them, how to live to the glory of God, what it means to find your identity in Christ and not in all this other junk, that's out there, screaming in their ears. This is who you need to be. That was a really important moment for me that the Lord really used. In fact, on the way home in the airplane, I was reflecting on it with my wife, and she just looks at me. She's pretty direct. She says, you need to stop listening to the father of lies.
Gosh.
I'll never forget that, right? She is direct. So, and I was allowing those voices of, just blame and all that, those lies to come at me. And what I've learned is this, and I hope this would be helpful to everybody there as you think about the line between relevance and truth and how you present yourself and how you construct your ministry. And that is, I tell students now when I get up to talk to them, I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to honor you, and I'm going to speak to you adult to adult. I respect your cognitive abilities. I think we dumb things down too much, and I think by dumbing things down, we haven't set the bar high enough. And if we're going to hit a low bar, we'll hit a low bar, and it's not going to be helpful to our kids. I think kids want to be stretched. I've seen that more and more, and I just love that fact about kids. They're hungry. They're spiritually hungry.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. All right. I'm going to speak to you adult to adult. Respect your cognitive abilities. That kind of gets me off the hook for having to work hard to try to impress, with humor, which I use. But I want to give them things to think about that they can, grab onto and hold that will be life-changing. God will use that to be life-changing. The second thing I say is I'm going to tell you the truth. And I think sometimes we jump around too much because of the desire to be relevant, and we kind of hold back on the truth, or we soft pedal the truth. I want people to tell me the truth. And so, especially on this issue of sexuality and gender, I think we've danced around a lot because we don't want to hurt kids who are struggling. The struggles are real. Yeah. For many of the kids. For some, they're not. It's a cultural thing that they have an option with. But if I truly love my students, I'm not going to hold back on the truth. And in the context of relationship, I love you enough to tell you the truth. And we all need people like that in our lives. So I tell the truth as well. And I think if we take that posture, and that means that we have to know the truth, right? So we've got to study. You know, if we're spending more time curating our relevance, whatever we think that is, or whatever we're focusing on, more time on that than our time in God's Word, our ministries are gonna be fruitless and fall apart very quickly. And I think we see that in the adult church right now, when the adult church has become like big youth group because they were never nurtured out of, let's have fun and, we'll throw some gospel or some teaching in. Yeah. So that was a good question. Did I answer it?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
I will say I had a conversation with my executive pastor and my senior pastor, I don't know, maybe a month ago. And I was just telling them, I'm 44. I'll be 45 this year.
You're young.
Yeah. It depends on who I'm in the room with. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
But I told them, I feel like I am such a better youth pastor at 44 than I ever was in my 20s. I wouldn't have said that in my 20s, of course,
right.
But I really feel like I am in a prime season of my ministry here, and I'm enjoying this very much. Being able to, the parent piece we talked about earlier is so life-giving. I think I have found a confidence in just me, right? I was a youth pastor at 18, so we did 6 lock-ins my first year, Walt, because I loved lock-ins at 18. And I had a kid in my youth group who was 6 months younger than me. He's married with kids, and we're about the same age. Like, it's crazy. And so, I would never recommend that to anybody, but it was the journey we took. I wouldn't do a lock-in now if you paid me $1 million. Like, it's not happening. But I just feel like, to your point, when I'm having conversations with students now or parents, there's a depth there that I didn't have early on. And it's not to say what I did early on had no value or no merit.
Right.
I feel like I've been effective as effective as I could be along the way. But man, I'll tell you, you said something there that I have seen playing out probably for the last, I'd say at least 6-7 years, but more so even in the last 2 to 3. There is an authentic hunger among students and young adults to not just have, I think maybe 6-7 years ago, I was finding kids really open to spiritual conversations for the first time. Right. I mean, not for the first time, but more so. Like, I did college and youth. I'd walk across the campus of the university there, and I'm having crazy spiritual conversations. What I'm finding now is it's not just an openness to those conversations. There's a genuine hunger to know what's right and a desire to be challenged. And then even beyond that, a willingness to walk in submission to whatever God would ask them to do in their life.
Yeah.
And it's not clean and it's not fast. It's still slow and it's still messy because it's discipleship. But man, it's refreshing.
At the top here, and by the way, this is one reason why I love the title, the name for your podcast.
Yeah.
Because this is not a stepping stone. And I know guys who are older than me who are still in youth ministry and are extremely effective. And it's that relationship through which they relate to the kids, and the wisdom and the discernment that they have, just the experience, and that's what you're talking about here. But we're talking about first day of MTV. So one of the things that when Youth Specialties was still having the National Youth Workers Convention every year, I kind of got into this groove where Tick Long would come to me and he would say, what do you want to teach on this year? I'm going to give you 3, 4, 5 slots, whatever. And he always wanted me, because these things, it was interesting how this was connecting with people. I would always do like a cultural exegesis, a breakdown, a deconstruction of a particular band. And I would go into all of the music, and one of the things I would drive at is not just why is this connecting with kids, but where are the spiritual hunger cries? When Paul was in Athens, that's what he was looking for. Where's the evidence of spiritual hunger, the emptiness there that they're maybe aware of, maybe not totally aware of, that's really a hunger for God, right? That God-shaped vacuum. And so I would go into these things. And so I was, just thinking about that as you're talking about this, and I'll even go back as far as like 1991 and the rise of grunge music. I'm thinking about Pearl Jam, and one of the most haunting songs still for me, Pearl Jam's song Jeremy, about the kid who shoots himself, takes his life in class, in front of the class. I think about Kurt Cobain and Smells Like Teen Spirit. I think about so many of those songs, and the groanings were not camouflaged. The groanings were there. And we had to ask the question, why is this music connecting with kids so much? And I remember a conversation with a kid, a middle school kid, 8th grade. I didn't know him. I was speaking on a youth retreat, and I heard him in a cabin listening to some music that I'd never heard before. It was Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana. So it was back, 91. And I said, hey, what are you listening to there? And he played it for me. I asked him to explain it to me. And I said, what is it that you like about this music? This is an 8th grader. He goes, this guy's singing what I feel. And that's what you're talking about there, that I think we need to go directly to that, because, the further you are from truth and the further you are from redemption, the greater the hunger inside yourself. And I truly believe that art reflects that. Popular music has reflected that in so many different ways. I did a seminar once there. I thought, okay, this will be a stretch. I did one on the Dave Matthews Band. My wife and I were just immersed in his music and went through the whole catalog and everything. And it was amazing because I didn't know if anybody would show up. And the room was like packed, people on the floor, people outside the doors. And because they knew this. And as I started to unpack this, they're just going, yeah. And all that to say that this is the hunger that we can't dance around. It's there. And I got to that point, and I think it was about the time that I was teaching on, Dave Matthews, talking about him, that I said, when your kids come into the room, we sometimes want to entertain. We want to, welcome them in. Well, yeah, we need to do that. But kids today increasingly are saying, stop trying to entertain me. And if I may say it this way, cut the crap and get to what I'm here for. And I still see that. I still see that. When you look at the social problems that are out there, the anxiety, the mental health issues, they're ripe for this. They're ripe for the gospel.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what I've told parents even is, don't be afraid of those conversations in your home. It might feel awkward and at first, and it will be at first, especially if it's not a normal rhythm for you. But you don't have to, sit at the dinner table and give a 3-point, 5-point exegetical message from, whatever. Model your faith before your kids and use the time you have, because it is gone so fast. You feel, everybody tells you that as a parent, but man, I look back, the time I miss most, I'll tell you, this is the thing I miss most about where my kids are right now. And I still have a little bit of this time, but I miss carpool, the time in the car where we could just talk about whatever. And, once my kids started driving, there's less and less opportunities for that. Yeah. We just took a road trip back. We're in Southern California now, and all of our family's still back East Coast. So for Thanksgiving, we drove back.
That's a long drive.
Oh man. Well, it is forever long. And we were on, it was, Cannonball Run. We were racing to get there. So it was like 14 hours from here to Amarillo the first day. But we're in the car, and of course, they've got headphones on and at times, but that trip, every time we do a road trip like that, I come back and tell my wife, like, gosh, I just miss the time in the car because it was such good conversation with us. Those moments as parents, they're priceless. But if you walk in and you parent out of fear, you're going to miss those moments, and you're going to look back with a ton of regret.
Yeah. A word for parents would be this. When things pop up that maybe you're unaware of, or perhaps you're aware of, and they make you uneasy, ask a lot of questions. Yeah. Ask a lot of questions. Just sit back. What do you think about that? What's your opinion on that? Tell me your story on this. How have you come to your conclusions? Who told you that? How's that working for you? Just ask the questions to get them thinking and processing. And that raises your awareness, And it also puts the brakes on for you from, if you're like me, from just going, okay, I know what's going on here. I'm going to tell you this is how it is. Conversation over. And all that does is cut off communication. And boy, I've had to repent of that. I saw something the other day I thought was really fascinating. And man, I wish I had done this, right? And I didn't know to do this, but it was about a dad. It was a girl, an adult, a young woman who was saying, this is what my dad did. And it was awesome. He wrote all of his kids a note when they were younger. And he said, I'm writing you this note, and I want you to put it away and hold on to it, because there's going to be a day when you really are going to need to come to talk to me. You're going to be navigating something difficult. Something bad has happened. You've made a bad choice. And I want you to hold on to this note, because when you bring it to me, this is my promise that I'm not going to be mad at you, but I'm going to sit with you, and we're going to work through this together. And I just thought that was a really neat strategy. I mean, we can tell our kids that, and I did.
Yeah. But
to put that, promissory note in their hands and let them have it. And she remembered it, and she just was honoring her father because he did that, and he carried through on that. But yeah, ask a lot of questions, and we can't drag our kids screaming and kicking into God's kingdom. Salvation is of the Lord. We're just instruments in the Redeemer's hands, and we need to tell the truth and love kids, and walk with them even through the sticky, difficult, bad stuff that and they're going to make those decisions just like you and I did. Yeah. And probably still do.
Yeah. And listen, everything I did in high school was a rumor, right? There was no social media for it to be blasted around.
Yeah. Unfortunately, in my case, there are eyewitnesses, and in some cases, photographs. So, yeah.
I tell parents often, like, don't feel the pressure to know everything about everything. If your kids are using, words you don't know, or they're talking, there's a movie or something, then just ask. You don't look dumb for asking. You look like you're a concerned and caring parent.
Yeah,
and that's fine.
If we're not asking questions, what are we always doing? We're always telling.
Yes.
Right. And there's a place for telling. We need to tell. God calls us to tell. But sometimes the telling, I think all the time, in so many ways, the telling, what we tell needs to be informed by what we hear when we ask questions.
Yeah. Well, and we're really good, I think in general, as a culture, as a society, we're guilty of this in youth ministry, parents. We talk at kids a lot more than we talk with them. And talking with them, it carries it much further. And it just takes some intentionality and some patience.
Yes, and if I can say that's a developmental issue that we need to be cognizant of as moms and dads, and that when our kids are little, we're constantly telling them what to do. Right? We're thinking for them, but when our kids get to be teenagers, because the God-given process of the brain getting wired up and the frontal lobe taking shape, which doesn't happen fully wired up until about the age of 25 or 26. And that's the part that's responsible for executive functioning, decision-making, and impulse control. We step in, and I think at times we still need to be the frontal lobe. But I think there needs to be a much, much more an expanding, growing amount of time where we're thinking with them rather than thinking for them, because that honors their cognitive abilities and their thinking abilities, and it also trains them and how to think as an adult. I like to say think Christianly if we're discipling them, well.
Yeah. I don't know if this is true for everybody. This has been true for me. I have counseled parents. Actually, my wife and I had dinner with a family here, a couple, mom and dad, maybe, I don't know, a few months ago. They were really struggling with their son, trying to figure out what to do. So we went out to dinner, and it was this very conversation. Like, it feels like you're really, this kid's old enough. He's, high school, older high school. Like, you're just not talking with him. You're just drawing a line in the sand in every conversation you're having. And he's pushing for independence because that's a natural progression of maturity. And so what I always tell parents, and they have a daughter too, and they're like, he's just so different than our daughter. I'm like, yeah, of course. And so, I said, man, when I'm talking to my daughters, or when my wife talks to my daughter, it's a face-to-face. Sit across, they'll talk and talk and talk. With my son, it's never that. If I sit down across from him, it's going to be weird and awkward, and he doesn't want to be there. But if I'm walking beside him, side to side, man, that guy will open up. So, or if he's doing something tactile, if we're doing s'mores, or if we're, we could be just going on a walk, he'll pour out and open up then. And my daughters, they don't, not as much, and so I feel like I just tell parents, man, know your kids. I think in general, guys are more shoulder to shoulder, side to side talkers.
Yeah.
If you get a group of junior high boys and throw a Frisbee, they'll tell you anything.
Or build a fire.
Or build a fire. Yeah.
Yeah.
Girls, you don't have to ask them to talk. They'll just, sometimes it's how do you get them to stop?
Yeah.
But I think for parents to recognize it, your kids long for you to lean into those conversations, and they do care what you think. It doesn't feel like it, but they, more than they care what you think, they care that you care what they think. And I think if you can navigate that with a little bit of patience and compassion, it goes much further. So,
yeah,
take
absolutely.
a minute.
You're right. You're spot on that. And, I do. I mean, our kids, they've been made for input, right? They've been made for input. They've been made for a relationship with God. They've been made for a relationship with mom and dad. Sin has broken so much of that, and I was going to say too, let them make mistakes.
Yeah.
My dad was good at letting me make mistakes, because I would disagree with him on things. No, it's not that way, Dad. Okay, do it your way. And I just totally screw up. And he never came back and said, see, I told you. Yeah. All he had to do was come back. And I knew he had told me, right?
Yeah.
But I think, and by the way, when they make mistakes, don't cover for them. Let them suffer the consequences of their actions.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I always tell parents, like, give your kids, especially as they're younger, give them safe places to fail.
Yes.
And allow them to fail so that they learn early what it feels like to fail, what you learn how to support them when they fail, so that when they get bigger and the mistakes get bigger, they're not running away or hiding things from you. And you're not coming in, unrealistic on how to correct it.
Yeah.
Can you, but I want to be mindful of your time here, Walt, but I do want to give you some time to talk about the conference that you guys have. I know that wasn't the purpose of this, but such a great conference. And then maybe even some of the resources that you have there at CPYU.
Yeah. Well, the gateway for us for everything we do here at CPYU is just come to our website, cpyu.org. That's growing all the time. We update daily on some of the news and research that's out there. We're actually, if you get on there and you subscribe, we're launching a new thing very, very soon, and we're going to be promoting this at Conclave. It's called the Youth Culture Field Report, and it's going to be a weekly email that's free that people can get, and that'll provide a gateway as well, not just information on what's happening in youth culture to keep you up to date, make it easy for you, but that'll provide a gateway to a lot of our other resources that our folks are working on here. Just about everything that's on our website, I will tell you this, is free. Download these handouts, download the parent prompts. You can distribute them digitally. You can print them out. If you're going to be at Conclave, we're going to have a whole bunch of them printed out there. You can take what you want, have a conversation with us. Love to meet people. So all those resources are there. I will say that much like your podcast, we have 3 podcasts. We have one called Youth Culture Matters. It's a long-form podcast. It's been going for about 5 or 6 years. We're just about up to 200 episodes where we talk with people who are experts in a field, or we unpack a particular issue, and we're always looking at it Christianly. How can we respond prophetically, preventively, redemptively? So that's Youth Culture Matters. You can access that wherever you get your podcasts or on our website. We have a 1-minute daily that's been going as a radio show for almost 20 years now. And we're recording them new spots every day, and they're on about 900 radio stations around the country. If you can get it as a podcast too, that's an easy give to parents, just to raise their awareness. And then we started one a couple of years ago called The Word in Youth Ministry. I don't host that one. Kyle Hoffsmith does, and Kyle's a youth pastor in Ohio. I love what Kyle's doing, and we record it all here. But he talks to folks about, help us as youth workers learn how to study and teach the Bible effectively for life transformation in students. Then you mentioned the conference. I'll just go to that real quickly. This is the 3rd year we're doing the Northeast Youth Ministry Summit. And this is a gathering in the beautiful Laurel Highlands of Western Pennsylvania, Ligonier, Pennsylvania. Some are familiar with Ligonier Ministries. This is a camp that's in that town where Ligonier Ministries started, the Ligonier Camp and Conference Center. And, it's not huge. We'll have 130, 150, 200 people there, strong on community. We curate our speakers to focus on youth culture issues, teaching the Bible issues, discipleship issues. Some of the folks who will be there, you're familiar with, some not, because we've gone out. We've got some people who are doing excellent work on LGBTQ stuff with kids. People are doing excellent work on ministry to teenagers and students with a variety of different disabilities and behavioral issues. We worship together. There's soul care there in terms of the evening and preaching. It's a lot of fun. So we sent out a card. I'll just read this, 20 seminars, 26 speakers, 6 plenaries, 4 opening intensives. And some of the names you would know, Duffy Robbins will be there. Doug Franklin from Leader Treks will be there. Crystal Kurgis from Young Life will be there. Others as well. It's just the community aspect of it is great. And we've had last year, it's not just for people from the Northeast. That's where it's held. But last year we had people from 3 countries and 21 states come, ranging in age, youth workers ranging in age from 19 up to 77.
Wow.
And man, the interaction is and we eat our meals together. It's wonderful. So if anybody wants to come, just go to our website, cpyu.org, or you can go to nymsummit.org and learn more, nymsummit.org. And it's not too late to register. It's March 17th through 20th of this year, 2025. Thank you for letting me talk about those things.
No, for sure. And I know folks, obviously Chris, good friend of both of us, has been raves about this thing. I mean, he loves it. And I just want to say, Walt, and I've told you this every time, just personally, thanks for what you're doing and what you've done. It'd be hard for me to express how much the work you've done has helped me and impacted me, both as a youth pastor and just as a parent, even from a distance. We've obviously interacted a few times over the years at different things, but I'm just thankful for it, man. I know it's benefiting so many, and I know it's a lot of work. And it's obviously something that you're passionate about, and certainly the Lord has gifted you in. And so, man, I just want to say thanks.
Well, it gives me great joy to hear that. And, this is not cliche. Seriously, all glory to God on that, because this is not something I aspire to. The way the Lord calls us into things is pretty amazing. And so I'm here. And it gives me joy to talk to younger youth workers who catch the vision for this and are willing to communicate, how this has been transformative for them. And, so thanks for saying that. That means a lot.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. Well, thank you, sir. Thanks for your time. I'm
Thank
sure
you.
We'll see each other at Conclave. So look forward to touching base and hanging out a bit. All right. Thanks, Walt.
Blessings.
Well, there you go, man. I appreciate Walt so much, his ministry there and all that he's done, especially for the time he's given even to help us here and come on the show a few times at the Longer Haul. Head over and check out all of those things at cpyu.org. Again, tons of resources for you personally as a youth pastor, youth minister, tons for you to give and refer to parents as well. Hopefully today was helpful for you. Again, if you've got time and you've got some ability to jump in and invest in some conferences this coming March, I cannot recommend the conference there that they put on more. And so take a look at that as well while you're over there. Again, thanks for jumping in and listening. Make sure you head over to thelongerhaul.com and grab all the links and things that we mentioned. That's it for today. We will catch you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Longer Haul Youth Ministry Podcast. Before you go, hit that subscribe button to keep these conversations coming. For notes, resources, and to join our community, swing by thelongerhaul.com. Stay encouraged, keep making a difference, and remember, we're in this for the longer haul. Catch you on the next episode.